Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and today we have two items because they're connected. One is a word to Bob Newman. The other is a word that came to me out of this word. But before I begin, to listen to anything else from This and That, go to talkingaboutthistandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. The portion from Bob Newman will be featured on our blog page. The blog page has read more links. Click on them. They will take you to the article. Each article has the podcast, which opens in a different tab so you can listen while you look. We will start with, do you hear the drums beating? And then we will move on to the word that came out of this. This is written, Do You Hear the Drums Beating by Bob Newman is written 1998. A funny thing happened on the boat to heaven. Maybe that is the wrong way to start, but I just cannot get that song out of my mind. I have worked 5 out of the last 7 days, and in an aside, he is an ER nurse. He worked nights, so yeah, this was while he was still working. Bob continues, averaging about 14 hours a shift, and frankly, I was just too physically exhausted to turn on the PC or to climb the stairs to go to bed. So I sat back on the sofa, turned on the TV, and passed out. Somewhere along the line, I heard a persistent voice trying to awaken me. As I opened my eyes, I looked into pitch darkness, and I could hear crickets chirping and occasional bird calls. I have never found myself entering a quote-unquote dream or quote-unquote vision as sore and exhausted as this was. Many end that way, but never start on such a slow note. I heard a whisper, this is not the time to be caught sleeping. And I looked over at the land, looking quote-unquote out and quote-unquote down. It was then that I heard the rough, repetitive cadence of drums in the night air. And once again, we are looking out and down into the valley of the shadow of death. Full stop. On Facebook, in her ministry, there is a lady who was sitting on an escarpment looking out at a valley filled with demonic things, entities, and they were in disarray and trying to organize, and she had this word about the church needs to stand at its post, it needs to get into prayer, it needs to do this thing. And as I listened to her, I had to shut it off, because deep down inside what I kept getting was, why? Be aware, but why would you pray against this? And it will get explained when I speak about what I was told. So, back to his vision. And I make this reference because this person is speaking in 2025 of seeing the same valley. When she described it, I immediately knew the valley of the shadow of death. It's where they gather. If you're in that valley, you're in the place of torture and torment. It's not a nice place to live. Selah. Bob writes, and the only thing that came to mind was the line, the natives are restless tonight, from some old movie, or many movies. At the point, I could neither remember or care where it originated. I just sat sprawled at the side of the master. He looked down at me, and I smiled, and shook his head, and all he said was, they know you are coming, dog. At this point, I sat up, and my mind began to race in several directions, and he laid back with his back upon that rock outcropping we had sat frequently on in the past, and out of nowhere I thought, who let the secret out? And began to laugh. No one has ever described visions or dreams of the glorified Jesus/Yeshua with laughter in his eyes and a grin on his face and a chuckle that can freeze the blood. And I thought of one little Bible verse. O Lord, you have deceived me, and I was deceived. You are stronger than I, and have prevailed. I am in derision daily. Everyone mocks me. And out of nowhere I thought of Jerry, because that comes out of the prophet Jeremiah. The prophet Jeremiah. And I remembered that line preceded. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. But his word was in my heart, as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. And I looked up at his grinning face, and I asked the dumbest question I've ever asked. I don't have a choice about this, do I? All he did was shake his head slowly from side to side. So I slowly stood up, stiff and tired. Everyone has been given many choices, dog, he began slowly, carefully it seemed. The problem is that with each choice a decision is made and steps are taken. You see things much differently than many simply because of who and what you are. So you always tend to lean in a set direction. As each situation arose, a decision was made. You slowly made your way to the here and to the now. Now that was a lot to choose from, to chew on. So I had to ask, here and now, this quote-unquote walk begins, I stated, pointing towards the valley. And out of nowhere came an old verse, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. I want you to listen to this, because this is where the word that I got came out of. God is speaking back now. You made your choice long ago, old dog. In fact, I knew what you would think and say since I laid the foundations of the world. Just call it one of the perks of being omniscient and omnipotent. Full stop, folks. Right there is where I received a word, which I will bring out after I'm done with his item. Bob writes, again, I had to think a bit, but before I could get anywhere, he said, it is not the destination, dog, but the way you get there that counts. The ends never justify the means. I might harvest where I have never sown, and I will take harvest where I have never planted. But that changes nothing for those servants that took me lightly and have done nothing with what they have been given. And I thought about the scriptures concerning the quote-unquote lazy servants, quote-unquote wicked servants, and a new chill ran down my spine. And I looked out into this valley I was once again crossing, and I thought about the idea of destination. I thought about Goshen, of Zion, and I saw the play on words. He smiled, and once again I heard the drums in the night, and I remembered some old line from some old movie about it, quote-unquote, being safe as long as they beat on the drum. When the drums stop, then comes the attack. And he just stood there smiling and grinning, and the quote-unquote light bulb went out in the old noggin. When were we told we had to play according to the dragon's rules? Let the dragons shuffle and deal, play global banking games, and run in the arena of geopolitics. And out of nowhere I saw, quote-unquote, Uncle Sam selling hot dogs, and I had to laugh. And then my laughter stopped cold. And I realized the little fact that all the logos and all the rhema mean nothing until a person makes a choice and quote-unquote steps are taken. And I thought of the many images I have with the sheep and the children and the servant, both the wise and the faithful and the wicked and the walking dead, my brothers/sisters, and the daughter of Zion. It's all easy as pie, I thought, and he still smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered, could I do what I need to get done? And I watched his smile soften, and he said simply, I told you everything would be okay, and I nodded. The quote-unquote cost and the quote-unquote means matter little as long as I run and keep running. And I woke up to see my wife had turned off the TV, but I could hear Stubby K singing, and I thought of Nathan Detroit and Sky Masterson. What a play on words. And I hear them saying to me, sit down, sit down, sit down, you're rocking the boat. I hear that sweet, soft voice up in the sky. The sun, my master, is saying, get out of the boat. And I remember an old joke from my captain about dragons. What do you do with a dragon? His answer, first you fillet them. I guess you had to be there, old dog. Now, I'm going to reread a small portion. You made your choice long ago, old dog. In fact, I knew what you would think and say since I laid the foundations of the world. Just call it one of the perks of being omniscient and omnipotent. I was previewing this to add to go to broadcast. After I read those words, today, 12:02 p.m., 6/10/25, sitting here in my home, sitting here at the desk, in reading an old post from Bob Newman, do you hear the drums beating? It's a vision, but in it is a line to Bob. You made your choice, old dog. You made your choice long ago, old dog. In fact, I knew what you would think and say since I laid the foundations of the world. Just call it one of the perks of being omniscient and omnipotent. Suddenly I heard, I have known before the foundations of the universe, before the singularity, the thoughts and words of every man/woman who would ever exist in time and space. It is based on that alone that I know my own. Nothing you see now or see coming, regardless those realities, is unknown to me, for I have planned it all. Both Calvinism and Arminianism miss the simple fact that I know all. It is on the basis of my omniscience alone that faith is given to some and not to others. I knew every choice of everything that would ever be, even the animals. Ergo, whom I elect to redeem, I keep. Whom I elect to allow to believe the lie, I grant the lie to speak to, and as pernicious I do not keep these, nor do I allow them to perceive the truth. 2 seeds for all time were established in the garden of man, serpent and woman, Satan's tare and my son's wheat/barley. Parentheses, 144,000. These are the Father's barley harvest. I take the wheat at tabernacles. Close parentheses. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the decision was made. The Son, the seed of the woman, would accept the will of the Father. Hence, his seed would always be disposed to do likewise. Folks, we hosted Daughter of Zion. We talked about election and reprobation from a Calvinistic standpoint of view. When I read one of Bob Newman's items, there was one of the killer doctrines is once saved, always saved. And I got struck, and I mean hard. I am still coming to grapple with everything. I'm still coming to deal with what happened, to understand what happened to me, be that as it may. Once redeemed, knowing every thought you will ever think, the Father will either have you kept in the hand of the Son or allow you to fall away. The parable of the 4 seeds is the other secret. The seed is the gospel. Some of it falls on the pavement. The ravens come and they eat it up. Those are the people who are pernicious. They are never going to be saved. Sorry. Redemption is denied these. They are called the reprobate. The Father, the omniscient one, has known their thoughts because he looks at our hearts, and he knows our hearts from the moment before we are even made in our mother's womb. This goes back to the Psalms. Before any of my days were ordained, established, or even performed, you knew every one of them. This is something David said in the Psalm. Go Google it. Based on his omniscience alone, he has, in the distant past, decided and predestined every life and set it in order. We merely walk it out. We fulfill his will with every thought we think. His desire is to see us turn to him. His knowledge tells him many will not, but the remnant will. Those are his. The rest are cast to the lake of fire forever. Ergo, the doctrine of election, as put forth by Paul, stands, but it is not based on faith. Faith is supplied by the Son of God, who loved us and gave himself for us. We are to have taken up our cross and become crucified with Christ, that in our physical lives now, or in our physical lives as they are, as we live them in whatever time, who knows, these might outlive me, that one is living, they will become crucified and live by his faith alone. The faith of Jesus Christ is perfect because it is based on his divinity and knowledge of all things, and trust of the Father that cannot be broken. That faith is supplied us through the Spirit, the most Holy Spirit of the one true and living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is why we are told to walk in that Spirit. Walking in His Spirit will cause us to be walking in His faith. That will bring us to the place of self controlled by Him, transforming how we think as He knew it would. There are no secrets, but you are not an automaton. Within the purview of the perfect will of God are an array, a multitude of choices, small ones and big ones that we make. They don't bother Him because He knows they're coming, but we still live out our lives. Those that listen and go, oh, well, then I give up. I'm not going to be saved. I'm going to hell. Then you want to believe the lie, or do you? Because in the end, what I'm talking about is literally coming back at you with the gospel. Whosoever will call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But you must call in sincerity and brokenness of spirit and of heart. Disingenuine calls are made aplenty. Every revival has them, and we notch the belt. So many. Our seed that is rocky. The rocks and the stumbling stones of offense have not been removed. The fallow ground has not been made ready. So many of us are in the weeds, and the seed is aborted there. It dies there. It either never develops or it rises up only to be burnt away. Only that which will fall into a ground which has been made ready, only those will actually produce some level of fruit. The level of the fruit is one thing. The level of the talents is another. They're the same thing, 30, 60, 100-fold. And he gave, 10 talents, 5 talents, and 1 talent. But the 1 talent hid it. The other 2 tried to do something with it and doubled it. Nobody went beyond doubling it. But he was happy enough because he got back what he'd given them and some gain in return. The one who hides the talent is tare seed, serpent seed, thrown out into the outer darkness, where the grinding and the gnashing of teeth is, where the worm is not quenched, and there you're right into the hellfire for all eternity. Those are the ones that said, Lord, Lord. And he says, I never knew you. And there's the other point. Whom I knew, I predestined to be mine. This doesn't take the burden off of you. You must still walk it out in fear, for the fear of the Lord is clean, and it will grant you wisdom, and it will grant you understanding. And in trembling, not some drunken emotion, although the love of God is stronger than wine, and it will make you punch drunk. But these things come in their seasons, and they go in their seasons. What do you do in the dry when all there is the work, the repetitive grind of the work? Ponder this and what you heard, because right now in that valley, the drums are beating. The cacophony of calls are out there. Where is the bride of Christ? Why is she not beginning to sound the call? The last image of Scripture, the Spirit and the bride say, come, actually is the first image before any seal is broken. The Spirit and the bride, the Spirit through the bride, had to be calling for the day of the Lord to begin, wherein she would become ready for Him, purified in that fire. And that will do it for this episode of This and That. Until then.